I'm standing next to Honda's first electric motorbike, the new WN7, and the manufacturer is making a few promises to it. What those promises are, and whether Honda can actually deliver on them, you'll find out in this video. So, a big welcome to 1000 PS TV. We are in Malaga today, and I got to ride the new WN7. And right at the start, I want to give you a bit of context quickly. So we're looking at this bike the right way. This isn't a tourer, meaning a big 600-kilometer trip isn't going to be comfortable on it, but that's not what Honda's aiming for either. This is a commuter bike built to get you through your daily run. And that's how you've got to judge it fairly. Because if we're honest, you wouldn't take a Fireblade or a Honda PCX and then moan it's not much fun on a tightrope either. So let's call a spade a spade. This is a commuter bike, it's meant for commuting. And above all, Honda wants to bring in new riders. People who maybe haven't had much to do with the brand up to now, but want to get into electric mobility. Before you get worked up about why I'm standing here looking so light and also wearing my usual 1000 PS teamwear for the video shots, it's simply because I've got Bowtech safety base layers underneath. Basically armored protective underwear, AAA certified, meaning abrasion resistant, up to 120 kilometers an hour. I've got it on in the bottom as well, but I'm not going to drop my trousers in front of you, so don't worry. I may have looked lightly dressed, but I was safe out there today. By the way, we'll be wearing this base layer more often over the season. That means at the end of the season, you'll get a test report from us on what we think of it and all our experiences. Back to the WN7. So we've established it's a commuter bike, which means people who aren't really heading off on big tours, or maybe riders who are only just getting started, will be looking at it. And because of that, I've gone for a slightly different approach for this test. I went onto Honda's website and had a look at what they actually confront you with. What claims does Honda make, and do those claims really hold true for the WN7? And to find out, we'll kick off right now with the Walkaround and the first claim. Right, the first claim I want to check is about the design. Honda writes, design and convenience. Clear and seamless, uniquely creative styling. That's what we're going to put to the test. Has Honda really created a seamless and creative design with the WN7? Let's take a closer look. We'll start at the front with this twin headlight setup, separated from the daytime running light. Honda's been very clear during the development of the WN7. They wanted to build a motorbike that isn't just a copy of a petrol bike, but something genuinely standalone within Honda's lineup. And honestly, just looking at the headlight, you can back that up. Yeah, the twin headlight look might be something we've seen before on Duke models. Another Japanese manufacturer has done it too on their 1000 class naked bike. But on a Honda, this execution is unique, and I'll give them that. And while we're still at the front, we might as well complete the walk around up here. 43mm upside down Showa forks, twin discs up front at 296mm in diameter with 2-piston Nissin calipers, and it's also on a Pirelli Diablo Rosso tire in 120/7017. As we move along the bike, we can keep looking at the design. It's genuinely very clean. There are basically no sharp edges at all, apart from these little ringlets. And while we're still at the front, we might as well complete the walk around up here. 43mm upside down Showa forks, twin discs up front at 296mm in diameter with 2-piston Nissin calipers, and it's also on a Pirelli Diablo Rosso tire in 120/7017. As we move along the bike, we can keep looking at the design. It's genuinely very clean. There are basically no sharp edges at all, apart from these little winglets. Other than that, the whole motorbike's been shaped really smooth, really dynamic, and above all, very futuristic. You haven't seen that on a Honda like this before, and I think it suits the electric concept well and hits the design brief. Honda fans might have already spotted the logo is different here because for Honda's electric division, the manufacturer has created its own category with its own logo to separate the normal range from the electric ones. Also interesting, before we talk about the battery, the radiator is genuinely very small for the simple reason that the battery is air-cooled and only the motor is liquid-cooled. Honda's engineers reckoned you don't need a big radiator, so that's why it's so compact. But that brings us to what's actually the most important bit, the battery. It's 9.3 kilowatt hours in capacity and it sits very low down in the bike. Personally, I think they maybe could have styled it a bit more nicely. Another journalist compared it to a PC tower, so anyone with a gaming PC at home will recognize that sort of look, yeah? It's basically the battery sitting there bare without anything properly dressing it up. Whether you like that or not is down to you. One thing I find really interesting on this bike is the foot brake, and that's for a simple reason. Manufacturers often say that on electric vehicles we don't need a clutch lever on the left, so we put the brake up here. Honda didn't do that. They've said the rear brake pedal stays down there simply because they don't just want to appeal to beginners, but also to riders coming from a conventional motorbike, and then it's a familiar element with the foot brake. If we keep looking along the side of the bike, it's built very slim, so the line is, I think, really nicely done, very modern. We've also got a very flat seat. I'll tell you what it's like to sit on in a moment when we do the seat test, but it all ties in really neatly and seamlessly with the design. Up here we've got the charging flap. It opens with a simple press, and that takes you to the charging connectors. I'll explain those properly later on in more detail. One thing I did notice with this black paint though is it might be a bit more prone to scratching. I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but on these still very new bikes you can already see the odd scratch here and there, so day-to-day use will tell us how easily it marks up in real life. If we move further back, there's an obvious visual highlight, the single-sided swing arm. The young Honda engineers were really proud they managed to pull that off. And in general, they've kept it very close to the Honda EV Fun concept. The concept bike the WN7 was first shown with. Proper eye-catcher, that single-sider. At the rear, you can already see the bike's built very slim, a very narrow package which, together with the seat height of 800mm, is great news for shorter riders. But even from the back, you can see it's running quite a narrow rear tire, a 150 1506017, which obviously helps it tip in nicely and makes the bike feel eager to turn. Also back here, we've got something that, within Honda, only the WN7 gets, belt drive. The WN7 is the only Honda motorbike that uses a belt. The thinking is simple. Keep it low maintenance and also keep the noise levels down. On the other side of the WN7, down here, you've basically only got the start button. Fireblade owners will recognize it. It's the same unit, mounted pretty low down, so compared with the bars, you've got to reach quite a long way. I'll be honest, I don't really get that placement. I'd rather have it up on the handlebar somewhere, but Honda's designers said they wanted to keep this area up here really clean with as few visual distractions as possible. Yeah, you can look at it that way. I just find it a bit impractical having to reach down every time to operate the bike. Speaking of impractical, the USB-C socket is under the seat. It's not up by the dash or anything, it's underneath the seat unit. And to even get to that charge port, you've first got to undo a screw here and then another screw over there. So the seat doesn't have a quick release that lets you get to the socket quickly. Once you've actually plugged a cable in, the Honda engineer said, yeah, then you route the cable from down there up to the handlebars if you want to. And when we asked why they hadn't done that themselves, why the customer has to sort it, they basically just shrugged. So they didn't really have a good answer for that one either. But now let's have a look at the control area of the WN7 from the rider's point of view. When you start it up, you immediately see the new Honda logo and then a display layout that's unique to the WN7. It's always a screen that only the WN7 has. So in general, the Honda design language is familiar, but these readouts, Honda was proud that the WN7 gets its own look, and using the classic Honda switchgear we know from their bikes, you can scroll through the display and, most importantly, through the modes Econ, Rain, Standard and Sport. But what's even more interesting in the menu, in my view, isn't just the standard heated grips, which you can set in 5 levels. Very welcome first thing this morning. No, you can also sort out your charging settings through the dash, meaning I can set on the screen how full I actually want to charge the WN7. That'll be especially relevant for people charging it overnight at home, because Sure, you don't always want to charge the battery to 100%, so here you can set a target charge and also the charging limit, depending on where you live and what kind of socket you've got. Other than that, the display functionality is classic Honda, pretty self-explanatory. You can of course pair Honda Road Sync, meaning you'll get call notifications and you can have turn-by-turn navigation as well. The other functions on here, like the speed limiter, I'll talk about later when we're riding, and the buttons too, because this is where you adjust the region. I just think it's a shame, and a bit of a missed trick, that there isn't a USB-C port right here. There's clearly enough space for a smartphone, you just can't charge it as easily as you'd like. There's no storage on the WN7 by the way, so under the seat you don't even have room for a phone. If you want to bring the charger with you, you'll need to go into the accessories catalog. Honda offers a screen as well as a rear bag or even a top box, and that's where you can stash the charging cable and a few other bits. But otherwise, on the design point, I do have to give Honda credit. They've pulled off a really clean look with this WN7. It stands on its own. This is not something we've seen in Honda styling before, and I think it fits this modern branch, so the claim of a new creative design is something I can back up. Walkaround done. Now let's see what the bike's like to sit on. I'm 1.75 meters tall, the seat height is 800 millimeters, and you can already see I'm very secure on it. We've got a very slim waist and a low seat height, which makes the bike easy to manage. Wet weight is 217 kilograms. Yeah, it's not exactly a featherweight, but because the battery is mounted low, you get a low center of gravity, so it's easy enough to handle even at a standstill. And you can make it even easier with a walk mode, meaning you can have the electric motor creep the bike forwards or backwards up to a maximum of 5 kilometers an hour. The riding triangle is properly comfortable, properly relaxed for a naked bike. The bars are exactly where I want them, they're nicely wide, so you've got good leverage when you're on the move, and the knee bend works for my height too. And I can reassure the taller among you as well, because the seat is very flat, so you can really vary your position. You can shuffle forwards and backwards quite a lot to get comfy. So the seat height isn't an issue in my book, and taller riders won't struggle either. Right, and I want to go straight onto the second claim. I want to check from Honda's website. Experience a new dimension of riding with Honda's first ever electric motorcycle. So the second half of that sentence is true. We've got the first fully fledged Honda electric motorbike here, but a new dimension of riding sounds very grand, very marketing led. What are you meant to imagine by that? In the Walkaround, I've already shown you the basic components that make this motorbike what it is. Shower forks, decent brake hardware, and all of that works. So you can say the essentials you need from a motorbike are there. Honda's also been clever with the frame design on the WN7 because the battery unit is a stressed member of the chassis. Up front, you've basically only got a section of frame around the steering head, and then at the back, you've got the rear subframe and the swing arm mount as separate pieces, but the rest is effectively handled by the battery. And it all fits together well. It feels nicely stable, but on an electric motorbike, the main part of the riding experience is really the electronics, especially the ride modes and how they're calibrated. On the WN7, you've got 4 ride modes on board: Rain, Eco, Standard, and Sport. And compared to a normal bike, a petrol bike, where you might stay in one mode or maybe 2, on an electric motorbike, it actually makes proper sense to switch between the modes. Starting where it feels at home, in town, the Eco mode is completely enough. You get a pleasant throttle response, a very gentle throttle response, meaning you can be a bit ham-fisted with the grip and it won't catch you out because the power delivery is capped and above all comes in very smoothly. In Eco, you also get the strongest limitations, although you can set that freely anyway. On the left bar, there's a rocker, similar to what you get on the DCT models with the plus and minus buttons for shifting up and down. So no matter which mode you're in, you can choose how strong you want the bike to recuperate. It only really starts once you're below 95% state of charge, because at a full 100% it can't do it yet. Where's the energy going to go when the battery's already full? But once you drop under that 95% mark, you can use it properly and really tailor it to the riding situation. Heading downhill, you can shove as much energy back into the battery as possible. Want it to freewheel? Just glide along, turn it completely off, no problem. You can adjust it as you like, but it's also linked to the ride modes. The second mode that I think makes a lot of sense is Standard. That's the mode the bike always starts in, as you'd expect, and I see that as your general A-road mode because the response is noticeably more direct. You make brisk progress, overtakes are properly doable, so if you're out on country roads between towns and villages, you can get a move on and you don't have to feel like you're hiding from a real motorbike. The third mode we used most today was Sport, and as the name suggests, full power, full regen, and the traction control, which works lean angle aware, allows the most. That's basically the fun mode. If you want to head out onto the road, pin the throttle and just feel that electric punch. After all, we've got 68 horsepower peak and 100 Newton meters of torque. You get going properly. Once you hit 130 though, you run into what I'd call an invisible wall. At 130 it tapers off and there's no more to come. But up to that point in sport mode, yeah, you don't need to be embarrassed next to anything. This WN7 really pulls. The last mode, Rain, is set up fairly similarly to Eco. I didn't really try it today because we got lucky and it didn't rain, but Rain mode is there to get you safely from A to B. It's not about having fun, it's just the electronics keeping everything calm and controlled so you don't have any drama while you're riding. On the move, what impressed me most was how pleasant and how grown up the WN7 feels to ride. We've got a bike in the A2 or even A1 class. You can also buy it restricted to 15 horsepower. But even so, it's a naked bike that genuinely feels like a proper naked bike. This isn't a toy. In town, it's got a really calm, settled ride. At low speeds, it stays stable. You can play nicely with the balance between regen and throttle and trundle along smoothly at walking pace, really composed. That's been done very well. But at the same time, it feels properly agile and light, at least subjectively light, so you can thread it through traffic queues without any stress. In the city, it impressed me, which I expected, but the big surprise for me was out on the country roads. We had the chance to ride some properly quick mountain roads, and we were doing 100 through the bends because they were long flowing corners, and here the WN7 felt genuinely stable. I wouldn't have expected that from such a compact little bike, but I didn't feel like I was missing anything. You can hold a clean line through the turns and you really appreciate that narrow 150 rear tire. It helps it roll into the corner easily and keeps it nice and agile. And when you're cornering like that, you feel very confident. To use the English word, properly sure of yourself. You've got no doubts that something's going to misbehave or get unsettled. It feels planted on the road. While you're riding, of course, you start playing with the kit you've got on board. And here I was a bit disappointed because I think Honda missed a trick. We've got a speed limiter. So like in a car, you can set, say, a maximum of 55 kilometers an hour. You accelerate and then it just stops pulling. So you stay at that 55. In a car, if you suddenly need to accelerate hard, you just pin the throttle and you'll override the limit and go faster. On the WN7, unfortunately, you can't do that. If you want to disable the limiter, you really have to press the button again to get full acceleration back. That feels like a missed opportunity in my view. Another missed trick is that we don't have any cruise control at all. Proper cruise control, set the speed and relax your right hand. Nope, not here. We asked Honda's developers about it and one of them said, "I just don't like cruise control, so we didn't include it." Maybe he was joking, I'm not sure. The Japanese sense of humor can be hard to read, but the fact is, there's no cruise control. Even though on an electric motorbike, it would be an easy one to implement, especially as we've already got the button for the speed limiter. I can only assume it's a software thing they'd have to tweak, but otherwise, out on the road, I didn't really notice anything negative about the WN7. You can just tell there's a big manufacturer behind it. This is Honda, and the engineers who built this bike have spent years working on conventional motorcycles, so they already know exactly how the fundamentals of a motorbike are meant to feel. So, to answer the question of whether I'm experiencing a new dimension of riding, I'd almost say, sort of, yes and no. Because on the one hand, it rides just as calmly and normally as a conventional petrol motorbike. But riding electric does give you its own distinctive feeling because you're maybe not chasing the best acceleration or the best drive out of a corner to get the quickest time to the cafe. No, on an electric bike you rethink it. You're more focused on how you can work with regen, how you can manage the range to get from A to B and maybe finish with a higher percentage left on the dash. So, a new dimension, yes, in a way, if you've never ridden electric before. Let's move on to the third and final claim I want to check. Charging supports standard charging with Type 2 as well as fast charging with CCS2. When fast charging, it takes around 30 minutes to increase the charge from 20 to 80%. Just enough time for a coffee stop before your next ride. Right, and that brings us neatly to the topic of charging and range. What's it like on the WN7? I should say up front, we'll have the WN7 back with us at the office this summer so we can test it properly, because at these press events, the schedule is pretty tight. We don't have time to run the battery down, and we also don't have time to head over to a CCS2 charger and actually look at the charging curve. So for now, I can only talk about what Honda claims and what the range looked like for us today. We rode 69 kilometers today, and at the end of the day, I still had 34% showing. Another key point for riding is the question, does the WN7 start limiting power at some point? If you get into a critical range, the answer is yes. Below 20%, the power is reduced in steps, so you effectively enter a power safe mode to make sure you can still reach your destination reliably. I added things up. Based on the distance ridden and the remaining range it was showing me was 110 kilometers. With a WMTC figure of 140 kilometers, I think that's a number you can accept. We had a lot of wide open throttle in there, not really a realistic ride in the way a buyer would probably use it. So in terms of range, I'd say it gets pretty close to the factory claim, which seems fair enough. When it comes to charging, there are 3 ways to charge the WN7. When you buy it, you get a Shuka plug with it, meaning a Type 2 connector for the bike and a standard household plug for the wall. Honda says that takes 5.5 hours to charge from 0 to 100%. Optionally, you can also buy a Type 2 charging cable for public charge points. Or if you're charging it from a home wall box on AC, it takes 2.4 hours to go from 0 to 100%. And then the big headline with this WN7 is the CCS2 connector. We can charge on DC, meaning 20 to 80% in 30 minutes. That's what Honda states. They also showed it to us on a wall box in the presentation showroom. Yeah, you can plug it in, but what the charging curve actually looks like and how it behaves in real life, we'll have to check for you in the summer when we've got it in-house. But I'd say just subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you won't miss it. Still, looking at the WN7 as a whole, how Honda has conceived it, I think these charging options are perfectly reasonable, because in the end, a lot of owners will probably charge it at work or at home at the end of the day. And if you've already got a wall box, you can just charge it overnight without any drama. It's the same as with electric mobility in general. You simply have to tailor it to your use case to see whether it fits your life. Before we get to the price, I want to tell you one more thing. If you want to find out more about the WN7 or you want to ride it yourself, then I've got good news. At the New Church Summit 2026, Honda will be bringing the WN7 along, and you'll be able to test ride it there. And not just on a normal road, no, on a Moto Gymkhana course. Moto Gymkhana is a big Japanese motorcycle sport where it's all about riding as slowly as possible, as fast as possible. Sounds mad, but we've got a video about it online and you can try the WN7 there. So come to the New Church Summit 2026 in Neukirchen am Großvenediger. We'll be there, the Honda WN7 will be there, and you can give it a go. Right then, let's move on to the last point before we get to a conclusion. The price. The new Honda WN7 costs 15,000 euros. Of course, there may also be incentives on top of that, so I'd ask you to check what it looks like in your region, what support you can get from the state or local government. But from the dealer, the new WN7 is 15,000 euros. That's not a small amount of money, and I don't even want to force a direct comparison with a petrol motorbike, because you're really looking at electric rivals here. And the WN7 does sit towards the pricier end, but you have to consider what's behind it. You've got a motorbike from Honda, the biggest motorcycle manufacturer in the world, and above all, you've got a dealer network that other electric makers simply can't match. You can find a Honda dealer pretty much everywhere. Other brands still struggle to get properly established, and that's a real advantage in Honda's favor. Yeah, 15,000 euros is a lot of money. I'm not going to judge whether it's too much or too little. In the end, everyone has to decide for themselves whether it's worth it. But having ridden the WN7 today, my bottom line on this bike is it's a solid first step from Honda into electric mobility on 2 wheels. Up to now, we've only had a moped and an A1 scooter. Now we've genuinely got a full-sized naked bike. Honda's done a good job with it. I think the range is fine because you have to look at it in terms of your use case. I just think they've missed 1 or 2 opportunities. For example, the lack of cruise control the USB-C socket being under the seat. And another thing we don't have is a parking brake. So parking downhill isn't an option either, because the WN7 will just roll away. Yeah, that's it from me and the new Honda WN7. Now, I'm obviously keen to hear what you think. What do you make of Honda's first electric motorbike? Write it in the comments. Like I said, all the details around charging, we'll make sure we catch that up later this summer when we've got the time, have the bike with us, and can really do a proper long-term test with the WN7. Either way, thanks a lot for watching. Drop a thumbs up if you fancy. I'd really appreciate it. And then I'll see you in the next video. See you soon. Cheers and bye.